So many of us want to find joy in our work, but we're often too caught up in the daily tasks to look at the big picture. In this episode, one of the most successful executive leaders on the key questions you can ask yourself to begin finding joy in your career. This is Coaching for Leaders, episode 577.
Produced by Innovate Learning, maximizing human potential.
Greetings to you from Orange County, California. This is Coaching for Leaders, and I'm your host, Dave Stachowiak. Leaders aren't born, they're made. And this weekly show helps you discover leadership wisdom through insightful conversations. Of course, we talk so much about coaching on this show and the importance of being coach-like and coaching others. And an element of that, of course, is self-coaching. How do we look inward? Today, we're going to do that a whole bunch and also look at it through the lens of joy. How do we find more joy in our work and use that as a starting point for really helping us to create movement and really take charge of our own careers and our own development? I'm so glad to welcome an expert today who's going to help us with so much perspective on this. David Novak is co-founder and the retired chairman and CEO of Yum Brands, the world's largest restaurant company with over 45,000 restaurants in more than 135 countries and territories. During his tenure as CEO, Yum Brands became a global powerhouse, growing from $4 billion in revenue to over $32 billion. After retiring in 2016, he became founder and CEO of David Novak Leadership, dedicated to developing leaders at every stage of life. David is also the host of the top-ranked podcast, How Leaders Lead, and founder of the leadership development platform of the same name. An expert on leadership and recognition culture, David is also a New York Times bestselling author. His books include Taking People With You, The Only Way to Make Big Things Happen, Oh Great One, a little story about the awesome power of recognition, and his latest book with Jason Goldsmith, Take Charge of You, How Self-Coaching Can Transform Your Life and Career. David, what a pleasure to have you on the show.
Well, thank you, Dave. I've really been looking forward to this because, I share your passion for leadership development.
Yeah, me too. I've been so fortunate to see your name and your work in so many places over the years. And, you've had such an incredible career and have supported so many folks. And actually, I'd love to go back a whole bunch of years to start us off. Back to 1997, there was a big change happening in your world and in the business of the work you were doing of KFC, Pizza Hut, Taco Bell coming together as a new brand. And the proposal was for you to become co-leader of this new company that would become Yum Brands. And it was not a proposal you were especially thrilled about, I can tell from reading in the book. Is that right?
Yeah, I had to do a little bit of self-coaching there for sure.
What is it that wasn't quite lining up with what you wanted?
Well, I got to go back just a little bit. I was running KFC and, I absolutely loved it. And I got a call from Roger Enrico, who was the chairman of PepsiCo. Well, little did I know, Dave, at that point in time, Roger was in the midst of preparing to spin off the restaurants, and create a new company that would be totally focused on the restaurant business so that he could focus PepsiCo totally on the packaged goods business. And he felt that focus would be good for shareholders. And it certainly ended up being the case. So he said, David, he called me up and said, we're going to do the spinoff. I didn't even know what a spinoff was at that point in time, but it meant that, Pizza Hut, Taco Bell, and KFC would become an independent company. And, so, he said, I'd like you to be the co-leader of the company. And I said, well, what does that really mean? And he says, well, I'd like you to be the sort of the chief spiritual officer, the operating guy that, really, you understand the restaurant business really well. And I'd like you to have this other guy become the CEO because he knows more about finance than you. And the other person happened to work at Taco Bell. So, I said, Roger, that really doesn't sound that right to me, but I will meet with this person and go to dinner with them and we'll see if this could work out. So I go out with them and, I realized that I'm basically looking at myself in the mirror. He was more of an operating guy, more of a marketing person. And when I probed him on the finance part of the equation, he had come from a convenience store, which had basically gone bankrupt. He had nothing to do with getting that company out of bankruptcy. another person had done that, and he had focused on the operations. So I'm looking at a guy who's basically has no more experience in finance than me. And I have more experience than him in the restaurant business. And the other thing that kind of hit me is he talked a lot about us making the kind of money we could make in this. And that, I never thought about making money in my life. Okay. What I always wanted to do was be a part of winning, part of creating greatness. And so I just didn't feel like this was going to work. So I had to really stick to my personal passion here. And so I told Roger that I wasn't going to take the job. It didn't make sense. I thought I should run the company. He says, well, David, you need to take the job. And I said, no, I don't want to take the job. And so I then about a couple of days later, I get this call from the head of human resources at PepsiCo. He says, David, you got to take this job. And I said, I'm not taking the job. And he said, you're going to get fired. And I said, well, go ahead and fire me. I mean, I don't feel like I should work for somebody that, I know the business better. And I think I have more skills to run the company. And he said, well, you're going to get fired. Well, Dave, once I hung up the phone after that conversation, I knew there's only one person that comes out on top in a situation like that. And it's usually not the person that says, go ahead and fire me. It's usually the boss who can make up the decisions.
Right.
So I then said, okay, I've now got to show Roger, why it should be me. So I went to work and I developed a presentation that I took up to share. I called up Roger, said, I'd like to share it with you. And I took it and met with them at purchase at the PepsiCo's corporate headquarters. And, I laid out basically what kind of culture I thought we should create, what processes that we should have, how this company should be run differently than what it had been under the PepsiCo tenure. And I laid out, why I should be the person. And I also said, look, I don't mind working for somebody, but you got to give me somebody that's going to teach me something and somebody that actually has better financial experience. And so basically in this particular situation, I couldn't talk to anybody else because the spinoff was totally confidential.
Right.
And so there was no one that I could talk to about this. And so I really had to figure out what was going to give me joy, what was going to make me feel fulfilled. And I never could work for somebody that I ever thought was, that I didn't think had more to teach me than what I could teach them. And that's always been a fundamental for me. I always wanted to work with people that I knew I could learn from and grow from. And I just didn't see that happen. So I knew I would be sapped going to work. And plus I knew that, we needed to have someone. If I didn't have the financial experience, we needed to get somebody who did. And it sure wasn't this guy. And we needed to team up with someone better. So, I made my presentation, made my pitch to Roger. And Roger said, David, I agree with you. I see why you don't want to work for this particular person, but I got to get you a chairman. And, you don't know what you don't know, which was probably true at the time and is true today. Okay. Yeah. But that's how I ended up being in the perfect position. I basically said no to Frito-Lay. And then I was running Pizza Hut and KFC, and I was in the perfect position to run Yum Brands. But I did have to stick to my guns and dig deep down into what would really make me happy versus just basically do what somebody else wanted me to do.
Yeah, indeed. And the rest is history, as they say. You write in the book, this might not have ever happened if I hadn't been able to coach myself through that crucial moment. What is it that you did that, from the lens of self-coaching, in retrospect, was so helpful to you to be able to hit pause and to do some of that own self-reflection?
Well, I've always been a person that has had high self-awareness. I've always tried to really understand what makes me tick. And just like I try to understand what makes other people tick when I coach them. And in that particular case, Dave, I love to grow. One of the biggest things that gives me joy is I need to grow. I need to learn. And for me, that means that I need to be around someone that's going to help me raise my game. The other thing is I love to be the leader. I like to have the opportunity to be in control and be accountable and guide my destiny. And so in this particular situation, gee, I didn't think I'd be working for somebody that I could learn from. And number two, I would be number two. And that didn't appeal to me at all. If I was going to have to work for somebody else, I wanted that person to give me the chance to really create the company that I knew we could create. And I knew that I would be very unhappy. I just knew this wasn't going to work out. I didn't see us being simpatico. I thought that would be bad for the company, bad for me, bad for PepsiCo, and just a bad situation all around. And so that's why I really made the decision I did to stand firm that, I thought I should have the top job. And if I wasn't going to get the top job, give me somebody who has financial experience and some great experience that can help us build a great company. And by the way, one of the people that I recommended to Roger that could be chairman of the company was a guy by the name of Andy Pearson, who used to be the president of PepsiCo. And he taught at Harvard Business School and worked at Clayton Dubilier and Rice in the leverage buyout business. And Roger said he would consider that. And about 6 months later, he made up his decision to ask Andy to team up with me. And all Andy wanted to do was to give me the power to run the company the way I wanted to run it and be my coach. So I was blessed in many, many ways through this whole process.
Well, you said such an important word a moment ago, self-awareness, and that being a bit of a superpower for you. And my sense is that there's a lot of leaders who struggle with that, of having that self-awareness. And you and Jason write in the book, what you need is to develop a good understanding of who you are and what drives you. And then you need a process, a kind of a blueprint you can follow that will help you use that knowledge to create conditions that will allow you to grow and thrive. And the book is really a bit of that blueprint of how to actually discover a bit of that self-awareness and how to get there. And the word joy comes up a lot in the book. And I'm wondering how you think about and define the word joy, and how does it help you to take charge?
Well, I think joy we define it as high energy happiness. Okay. It's like, you're really happy. You bring a lot of energy to what you do because you love what you're doing. It's like Warren Buffett, who I had the great privilege of meeting with for every year I was in as a part of Yum Brands, which, by the way, was another case of self-coaching. When I did become the CEO of Yum Brands, Roger is right. I did not have a lot of investment experience in terms of how to work with investors. And so I said, who could help me? So I went to see Warren Buffett. I used some of my contacts and went to Warren Buffett because I figured he could help me if anybody could in terms of, how to work with the investment community.
Sure.
And he told me, he said, David, you're so passionate about what you do, which is great. He said, but make sure you let people know what can go wrong in your business. They'll trust you more if you do that. Boy, that was such a wise thing for him to tell me. And I call that sober selling. And so I started from that point on saying, hey, these are all the great things, reason why we can grow. But you need to know that these are the two things that could go wrong in our company. And I tell you what, it really, you could see it just building trust right off the bat when you did that. It really did give me credibility. But I self-coached myself to go see Warren Buffett to get that kind of experience. So, the whole notion of joy is doing what you love. And the reason why I bring up Warren Buffett, in addition to the fact that it's a great self-coaching story, is that Warren Buffett had an autobiography, which was called Tap Dancing to Work. Okay. Because he loved what he was doing. He loved finance. He loved being curious about other businesses. He loved making, investments. This is what he was absolutely great at. And so he never, ever thought he worked. And I think when you do something that's joyful, work becomes your hobby. Okay. It's not like something you have to do. And that's why Jason and I really believe joy is so important. And, what we're trying to do is coach people through the process of figuring out how can you get joy in your life and your career.
Yeah, indeed. And the invitation that comes in the writing is using joy as your destination finder. That if you use that as the starting point, that can really open up so many doors. And there's a process that you and Jason outlined to really begin that and to start illuminate where that is. And the first step is to find your joy blockers, the what's getting in your way of having joy. How do you do that? Because that's something I think a lot of folks really struggle with.
Yeah. People do struggle with it, and people do have an issue with self-awareness. I think 75% of leaders tell you that they're highly self-aware, but I think 25% of the people that work for them don't think they're aware at all.
Yeah, okay? Right.
So there's a disconnect there. So what Jason and I do is we really believe in the process of really trying to understand, what your joy blockers are, and then figure out what your joy builders are. So the first thing you have to do is you have to self-reflect. You have to think, what was the worst day I had? My worst day at work, my worst day at home, my worst day personally. What specifically happens in those kinds of days that just absolutely sap my joy and take my joy away? What is it about your job that you just don't like? Okay. And write all these things down, write them all down and make a list. Then you go to the joy builder side of the equation. And you say, okay, what happens to me when I have my best day? Okay. When do I have the most fun? When have I had my most memorable moments that, I'll never forget because, it was a great accomplishment. What is it that makes my best day at work, my best day at home, my best day personally? Okay. Write all those things down. Okay. Then look at it. Then look at the ledger and then say, and look at what you're basically doing today, how you're living your life at home and at work, and figure out where you stand. You might be really, really a happy guy because you're on the joy builder side, and that's where 90% of your time is. I mean, we all have to do some things we don't like in our job, but you could be in a situation where, one of the joy blockers is you just don't like the people you work with. But one of the joy builders is you love the company you're in. So maybe what you have to do in that particular situation is move to another part of the company so you can do what you love with people that you like doing it with. But the main thing is that, by understanding what gives you joy and what takes away your joy, you can assess, how you're truly living your life. And then I think that helps you determine what the single biggest thing is that you can do to get you into an area that's going to give you more satisfaction and more fulfillment.
Yeah, indeed. And I want to ask you about that process of just sitting down and making that list. When I was researching the book and looking at some of your work, I stumbled across a quote from Blaise Pascal, who said, "All of humanity's problems stem from man's inability to sit quietly in a room alone." And I hope folks will forgive the gender bias of the quote, but I think the message is so true of what I've seen. Stopping to think and to create a list like you've described of what is blocking joy, where is joy showing up, that is just this, even to start and sit down, is a real obstacle for a lot of folks. And I'm curious, as you, when you're coaching folks, when Jason's working with folks, what do you find that helps just to get people in the place of willingness to sit down and to begin to ask that question?
Yeah, I think, you bring up such a great point here. You have to find the quiet time that makes you reflect. And both Jason and I really ask people to do this. Do the thing, look for their joy builders and blockers and take the quiet time to do it. And, another great exercise I have, Dave, is I call it the 3x5 exercise, where I write down, what am I today and what do I need to be tomorrow? And I do this every year. And in fact, the top 50 executives that I had working for me when I was at Yum Brands, I had them all do their 3x5 cards, and I would have coaching sessions with them once a quarter. And we start out with how were doing on their 3x5 cards. For example, for me, one of the things that I am is I'm very passionate, very committed, and I get very convicted. Okay. All those things are great traits for you to have as a leader, but on the downside, they can scare the hell out of people that work for you. And, so I needed to have more tempered passion, tempered enthusiasm. And so, that's an example of what I would share with my team. I said, this is what I'm working on now help me. But I would do, look at my personal style, my personal behaviors, and then what I needed to do also from a professional standpoint. Like I was a traditional marketer. I was great at at least good at doing TV commercials and print advertising. But then, digital came on the stage and I was behind the game. And so I told everybody, I got to get great at digital, because I'm not good at digital. And so I took actions to get better at that. But having, a process where you actually sit down and take the time to write down, and I write down all, what I am today, what I need to be tomorrow. I share with everybody that's important to me. And I also put it on my refrigerator. Okay. So I look at it every day and I keep it front and center. But I think, getting that quiet, you can't do this just off the cuff. You have to actually think about it, So like when it comes to joy, what's getting in the way of your joy? Really think about that. Get specific. Don't be general. Is it that you're traveling too much so you never get to see your family? Is it you're not growing like you want to grow? Is it that you just don't get along with your boss? But you have to really think about those things and take the time to do it. And you can't do it in the hustle bustle of life. You have to do it, by finding time for yourself so that you can get down to the real essence of who you are, what you want to do, and why you want to do it.
Yeah, I'm hearing you say a couple of key things there. One is just the decision that you're going to invest the time. Secondly, to actually set aside the time so that you're doing some thinking in advance on this and you're creating the space for it. And then I'm also hearing a third thing there too of once you have gone through that process of a bit of sharing what you've discovered with others and surfacing that and that regularly coming up in conversation. And so it's a framework to do what I think a lot of folks struggled with, especially when the pandemic hit, of course, of all of a sudden people had time to think, right? But they didn't know the process to follow of, okay, well, where do I actually start and what are the questions to ask? And just getting into that space and following that simple process of what's getting in the way, where does that joy show up? And like you said, then looking at those lists and seeing where are the similarities, what's the repeating themes? And I'm guessing that for some people, those themes come up really clearly when they look at what they've written. And for some people, maybe they don't see it. And when you talk with the people who are not seeing it, when the list comes up, what's getting in their way and what, if anything, helps them move past that?
Well, you're right. It's just not like a ABC kind of thing where you do this, you do your joy builders, you get your joy blockers, understand that. Then you get your single biggest thing. Sometimes, you're confused. Sometimes you don't really know what's next. Okay. So, one thing could be that's when it's time to go talk to some assistant coaches, talk to some people who really know you that can give you a better sense of who you are. Ask them, what they think makes you tick, what your strengths are, what your areas of opportunity are. And my favorite question is, what would you do if you were me? You don't have to do it, but you can certainly listen to it, So I think that, you go to other people. Now, what you might realize is, gee, I just don't know myself well enough. My single biggest thing right now is I got to get to know myself well enough so that I can actually make a stand in terms of where I want to go.
The one of the big impacts and coming out of this examination of joy is to get to something you mentioned a bit ago, but I want to dive in more, is the single biggest thing. And that's key in this. And it's interesting that it's one thing. What's the reason that it is one thing versus surfacing 7 or 8 or 10 things?
Well, again, Dave, by picking one thing, it forces you to think. It forces you to prioritize. Where I got this idea was when I was the CEO of Young Brands. I taught a program called Taking People With You, the only way to make big things happen. And we later wrote a book on that so we could scale the learnings to our restaurant managers. We had it published in 8 different languages. But the price of admission for the people who came to my 3-day program, which I taught from beginning to end, was what's the single biggest thing you're working on that could have the biggest impact on the growth of Yum Brands? And then I took them through the process of leadership I use to take people with me, getting the mindset right, having a plan, getting strategy, structure, culture, and then following through to get results. But it was all geared towards that single biggest thing that could have the biggest impact. And what I found from doing that was it forced people to really think about what it is they could do in their job that could have the most measurable impact on our company. And, that's where I got this idea. So when you think about coaching, I think the same thing works. What's the single biggest thing that you can imagine that will bring joy in your life, make the biggest difference in your life and career? And the more specific you are, the better, because the clearer your thinking is going to be. And at the same time, I think you need to really think big for your life and have high aspirations. So that's what we encourage people to do in the book.
What's a example of some of the single biggest things that you've heard that end up being things that people can really latch onto?
Yeah. Well, great thing for me was, when we first started out our company, we had a lot of success, and we went from having a junk bond balance sheet. We started getting some credibility. The stock was doing really well, and then I said, well, what's the single biggest thing that we can do, as a company? And I said, well, you know what? We learned a lot from a lot of companies when we started our business. What we want to do is become the defining global company that feeds the world. I said, that's the biggest thing I want to do. I want to build this global company that people are going to want to come to learn on exactly how we did it. And within that, that meant we wanted to have a famous recognition culture, that was renowned and written about. We wanted to make sure our brands were vibrant everywhere we do business. And we wanted to make sure that we help people who couldn't afford our food eat food. And that's why we tied in with the World Food Program and really had a great corporate social responsibility effort. But anyway, the whole point is that your single biggest thing is going to change as you go through your career. My single biggest thing when I got out of journalism school at the University of Missouri, I loved marketing and I loved advertising, but I had to get a job. Nobody was hiring back then. Right. Inflation was 20%, unemployment was double digits. If you were trying to get in the agency advertising business or marketing business, nobody would hire you because you didn't have experience. I just wanted to get in the door. My single biggest thing was to get an opportunity, which I got. But then as you grow in your career, your single biggest thing is going to change because your ambitions and where you're at in your career is going to change. And you need to have that kind of self-reflection all along the way that allows you to kind of take your next step in whatever that journey is going to be.
I so appreciate that invitation to think about it as it's going to change, because I think the hang up that a lot of folks have, thinking of folks I've worked with and just in my own life as well, is we think, there's so many things I want to do. There's so many ways I want to grow. And we try to do 7 or 8 or 9 or 20 things all at once. And the irony of it is that I've experienced the same thing. When I've zeroed in on one thing and then I focus there, and then get traction there, and then take on the next thing once the next thing's important, I actually end up able to do way more over time than when at times I've tried to do 7 or 8 or 10 things at once. And I see that replicated again and again in our members too, that when we can get down to focusing on one thing at a time, it has a way of focusing us on the what's next in a way that helps us to just move forward consistently and sustainably over time.
Dave, I couldn't agree with you more. The story I told about becoming the CEO of Yum Brands, I loved PepsiCo. My goal was to become a division president of PepsiCo. I had that job. I was running Pizza Hut and KFC. I didn't even know what a CEO really did. Okay. But when the world changed, then my single biggest thing was I wanted to make sure I was in the best possible position to build a company that I knew I was the best possible leader, at least in my own mind at that time, to take to great heights. I really wanted to, build that company. And I was, once that became something that could possibly be attainable for me, then I really had a new single biggest thing, and that was to become the head of this new company. But it wasn't even on my mind until it became an opportunity.
Yeah. One thing at a time based on the context of what's happening. I so appreciate the invitation. Jason and you have just really outlined so much structure here. And David, you've had just an incredible career. I mean, both as a business executive and as a CEO and producing amazing results, and now also teaching other leaders. As you have been working on this book over the last few years, one of the things, I mean, you point out that you're always learning and growing. It's a next single biggest thing, right? What's something, as you reflect on the last couple of years, that you've changed your mind on?
Well, it wouldn't necessarily be in the area of leadership, but it would be in the area of just maybe technical development. I've never been a technology person per se. In my wife's diabetic, and she had a severe diabetes seizure, and I really learned all about her diabetes. And we were using these pins to give the shots, and I would look at the sliding scale, and I could, I got very comfortable doing that. And then we got this pump, this new diabetic pump, that tandem pump, which has a Dexcom. It's much more sophisticated. You've got to put all this apparatus on your wife, and my wife needs me to do it because she can't see as well as she needs to see to do it. And the first week we had it, we made a big mistake together, and she over bolused and gave herself way too much insulin, and it took us 6 or 7 hours to get it all worked out. And I knew how to do the other stuff manually so well. I wanted to go back and do that. And so, but my wife said, we can do this. She forced me into it. So I've literally changed my mind, that this tandem pump and this Dexcom, it's the greatest thing since peanut butter. Okay. I hated it when I first started doing it, but I learned how to do it, and it helped me really change my mind on something that's very important and, in fact, life-saving in my wife's case.
David Novak is the co-author with Jason Goldsmith of Take Charge of You, How Self-Coaching Can Help Transform Your Life and Career. David, thank you so much for your time and your leadership.
Thank you, Dave, and I appreciate all you're doing, and keep up the great work. The world needs better leaders.
Indeed. If this conversation was useful to you, several related episodes all around careers that I'd recommend for you. One of them is episode 352, How to Find Your Calling, with my guest, Ken Coleman. Ken is an expert at career transitions, helping folks to really zero in on what's most important and then to put the architecture behind that. In episode 352, we talked about some of the key strategies, and Ken also shared a number of stories and analogies which really illuminate that so beautifully. Episode 352. A great complement to this conversation. I'd also recommend episode 542, Align Your Work with Your Why. Kwame Marfo was my guest on that episode. Kwame is an alum of our academy and walked us through in that conversation some of his own personal story and how his personal story has informed his professional path in his career. A beautiful example of someone really doing the work that we talked about in this episode of asking the big questions around the why and what finds joy, and then how to align the work with that purpose. Episode 542 for a bit of inspiration there. And then finally, I'd recommend episode 555, How to Nail a Job Transition. Sukhinder Singh Cassidy was my guest on that episode, also a tremendously successful executive leader. We talked in that episode about the transition point when you do decide it's time to move on, perhaps for another role within the organization that's substantially different, or perhaps you're moving on from the organization entirely to something new. A lot of details there on how to exactly execute on that transition well, and how to really look at all the different kinds of stakeholders in that to make that transition happen effectively. Episode 555 for those details. All of those episodes you can find on the coachingforleaders.com website. If you haven't yet, I'm inviting you to set up your free membership at coachingforleaders.com. It's going to give you access to a ton of benefits of free membership. And one of those key benefits is being able to search the library by topic. All of the interviews that I've aired since 2011 are there on the website. Most importantly, though, they are all tagged by topic. So, for example, if you are asking questions right now about your career and looking for more resources around career growth, in addition to the episodes I've just mentioned, we have aired so many, dozens and dozens of conversations over the years on career growth and finding joy in your career, not only for you, but of course for being able to support the people you're leading inside your organization. It's one of the key benefits of being able to go into the library and search by topic. I know many of you listen to the podcast as it comes out in order, and also many of you go back into our library and listen to episodes. And some folks I know like to go back and listen in order, or even go back to the early years of the show and listen in order on the podcast app. And you can find all of our episodes in order, everything, the full library on all the apps and directories out there. But what you can't find on the directories is the topic you're looking for right now. And particularly if you're diving into the library, I would encourage you to think first of what's important to me today. What is the message I need to hear? What am I struggling with right now? Perhaps what can I find that's going to help me today? And we have really put the architecture around the website to really support you in that way, to make it as practical as possible to surface what you need right now. It's one of the many benefits of free membership of being able to search the episode library. For those of you who have your free membership set up, just log in, find the episode library, and you'll be able to search by topic of all of the past episodes. All of that and more at coachingforleaders.com. Set up your free membership and you'll be off and running with us in just a few moments. Next week, I'm glad to welcome Bonnie back to the show. She is going to be joining me to respond to the questions that have come up recently from you. So join us for that conversation on question and answers next episode, and we'll see you back next Monday. Take care.